Before I ask you to account for this month and charge you with the next one, let me first walk you through a truth about endings that almost nobody talks about. Because how you close a chapter determines far more about the next one than most people ever realize. Most people treat the end of a period the way they treat the last few minutes of a long meeting. The energy has been spent, the important things have been said, and the remaining time is just the formality before everyone gets to leave. They clock out early in their heads. They conserve what is left for the fresh start that is coming. They let the final days of a month, a project, a season become the days that barely count. The transition time, the buffer, the unremarkable space between the real work and the next beginning.
That is the wrong relationship with an ending. And I want to give you the right one today. Because the person who finishes this month with everything they have does not just close a chapter well. They write the opening line of the next one. The energy, the discipline, the identity you carry across the threshold is determined not by the beginning you are about to make, but by the ending you are making right now. Who you are at the end of this month is who you are at the start of the next one. The fresh start does not come from the date changing. It comes from the person you have been consistently enough to carry forward. Today, I want to show you 3 people who understood that the end of one chapter is not separate from the beginning of the next, and who finished the hard chapter with everything they had in order to begin the new one as the person the new one required. Let me show you what that looks like, and then let me show you what it means for today. Welcome to Motivation Daily. Think about Nelson Mandela on the day of his inauguration as the first democratically elected president of South Africa, the 10th of May, 1994. This was the beginning of an extraordinary new chapter. But to understand what made it possible, you have to understand how the previous chapter ended. In the final years of his imprisonment and the years of negotiation that followed his release, Mandela was offered multiple opportunities to compromise, to accept partial freedom, partial representation, a managed transition that would have been significantly less than what the struggle had been about. He did not take them. He finished the previous chapter, the chapter of negotiation, of sacrifice, of choosing principle over expediency, with exactly the same commitment he had brought to the beginning of it. He did not ease up when the end was in sight. He did not accept the diminished version of what he had been working toward simply because a diminished version was being offered. He carried the standard of the struggle all the way to its conclusion, which meant the new chapter he began on Inauguration Day began at the height of everything the struggle had been about. How he ended the previous chapter determined who he was at the beginning of the next one. And who he was at the beginning of the next one changed the world.
Now, think about J.K. Rowling. In 1995, Rowling finished the manuscript for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. A completed book, a full story, a beginning and a middle and an end that had been written in cafes in Edinburgh while her daughter slept in a pram beside her, in the stolen hours of a life that included poverty, the early stages of recovery from depression, and a single-parent existence that left very little margin for the kind of creative work she was doing anyway. She finished it. Not a first draft, not a partial manuscript, not the version that would have been acceptable to anyone who knew what the circumstances of its creation had been. A finished book. And then she typed it up on a manual typewriter because she could not afford a photocopier and sent it to 12 agents. 12 rejections. She sent it again. It was accepted. But here is the thing that matters for today. The finished manuscript was the ending of one chapter that was not complete until it was actually fully, without excuse, complete. She did not submit a nearly finished book. She did not stop at the version that was good enough. She finished it. And that finishing, that commitment to closing the chapter at its full standard rather than an acceptable approximation of it, was the act that made every subsequent chapter of the story possible. The next chapter, the one that changed the world of children's literature forever, began with a fully closed previous one.
And think about Pelé, the greatest footballer of the 20th century, a man who won 3 FIFA World Cups, who scored over 1,000 goals in professional competition, who redefined what the sport could be. In 1977, after leaving Santos and completing a farewell season with the New York Cosmos, Pelé played his final professional match. He was 37 years old. He was not at the peak of his physical capabilities. He could have allowed the final match to be a sentimental occasion, a celebration, a ceremony. Instead, he played. He played with the same commitment, the same joy, the same absolute presence in the work that had defined every match before it. He scored in the first half for the Cosmos and in the second half for Santos, the 2 clubs he was representing simultaneously as a tribute to his career. He wept openly on the pitch at the end, not because the ending was sad, because the ending was worthy of everything that had come before it. He finished the chapter at full strength, full presence, full dignity. And what he left behind was not the memory of a great player diminished by time, but the memory of someone who honored the work right to the last moment of it. The career ended at the same standard it had maintained throughout. That is not just how you close a chapter. That is how you ensure the story of it is worth telling.
So here is the accounting I am asking you to make today. Not with guilt, not with the punishing internal review that turns honest assessment into self-flagellation. With clarity, with the fairness you would extend to someone you genuinely respected. What did this month build? What did it cost you that was worth the cost? What did you start that deserves to be finished before you turn the page? And what is the single most important thing you can do today, in these remaining hours, to close this chapter at the standard it deserves? Answer those questions. Then go live the answers. Because the next chapter, the one that starts tomorrow, fresh and full of possibility, does not begin on the date. It begins with the person you have been consistent enough to carry across the threshold. It begins with the discipline you maintained when maintaining it was hard. It begins with the standard you held at the end when holding it would have been so easy to compromise. End this month strong. Not for the month, for the person who begins the next one. June starts with you. Make sure you are ready.